Welcome back, friends and scoundrels, to Weird Wolf Unchained. I'm Bran.
And I'm Lynn.
And this is Movie versus Book, The Stepford Wives. Yeah, this was a thing.
This was a thing.
Start with synopses. You first.
Sure. For Joanna, her husband Walter, and their children, the move to beautiful Stepford seems almost too good to be true. It is. For behind the town's idyllic facade lies a terrible secret. A secret so shattering that no one who encounters it will ever be the same. At once a masterpiece of psychological suspense and a savage commentary on a media-driven society that values the pursuit of youth and beauty at all costs, The Stepford Wives is a novel so frightening in its final implications that the title itself has earned a place in the American lexicon.
It has. Saw that in the Wikipedia entry for it. Stepford wife is a derogatory term.
I'm aware.
It's rude. Alright, so mine. Joanna Everhart moves to a quiet town of Stepford with her husband and children. The town seems perfect. Maybe a little too perfect. There's something not quite right with the suburbs women. They're vapid, unfathomably devoted to housework, and completely subservient to their husbands. Joanna teams up with another recent transplant, Bobby, to investigate the mystery of Stepford's wives and makes a horrific discovery. And for the most part, those two were right on par with each other.
Yes, indeedy.
I've got a few characters. There's a lot of characters in this, and most of them didn't have names.
There were a lot of characters in this. Or they did, and I
just got to a point where it didn't matter anymore.
I just wrote down the important ones, I guess, or I gave up at some point because of my feelings toward the book.
We got Carol Van Sant, who is the first named character in the movie. Or the first character with a name. She's the first one we learn her name. Ted, her husband, which I don't think was her husband at the beginning part. I don't know. Walter the man, a.k.a. Joanna's husband. I almost said wife. Then Joanna, the woman. Diz, the creepy man. And Bobby are all that I wrote down. Charmaine plays a pretty decent role for a little bit.
She does. So, those were, all the same. There's a few other characters that I wrote down. Just various men from the Men's Association.
I didn't write them down there. I wrote down their names as they're mentioned or where it's necessary. Because really, the characters are mostly insignificant.
Mostly, it's just their occupations that's important. And that's only just all...
Is it?
Vaguely recapped at the end. Yeah. I mean, Diz is...
Go ahead.
Diz is the most important one, because that's what makes it click that they're robots, because Diz is because he used to work at Disney. The Hall of Presidents. And then there's a rundown of all the other men and what their jobs are. Optics, silicone advancements, electronics. They're all just the best in their fields.
It doesn't go into that much. Because her husband's a lawyer. You've got Frank the pharmacist. Ed is TV film guy. Diz used to work at Walt Disney. Or Disney World. Or whatever. He just says he worked at Disney. And that's why his name is Diz. Or that's why everybody calls him Diz. Or whatever. And that's kind of it.
Yeah, just here at the end, that just randomly, nicely lists everybody's name and occupation for you.
That might have been something I missed too, because I only watched it once, and I had to make notes, and it was a freaking 2-hour long movie.
But
How many pages?
120.
So, you got any opening remarks?
I didn't like it.
Why?
I mean, it's something to read to pass the time, but it's just blah. I think it barely fits into the categories of what we're doing here. I know it's a satire thriller, or that's what it's called, a suspense, but it's not. It's so very much not.
The movie, too, overall, I think it was a decent enough movie. I could see the potential of it actually being kind of scary, or at the very least, like, just weird. And I don't know if it, you can't really say it was the time. It was frickin' 1975. Everybody was on psychedelics. She could have made a really weird movie. But this part of the problem, and something that Ryan and I touch on when we talk about, we get into it a little bit on a tangent in our conversation about Paranormal Activity 3 or 4. I forget which one. We got off on a land of tangents in that episode. And we're recording this after, but I don't know which order they're going to go up in. So that's why I'm wording things kind of weird. But it definitely, this is a story that was trying to say something and maybe didn't quite know how to say it, or didn't know how to work the story around it well enough. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's a good concept, really poor execution. Like, there's a lot of praise for this book, and I just don't get it.
I'm going to be honest, too. This is going to be a tough one for us to talk about, because it deals with feminist themes, hardcore feminist themes, and we don't necessarily agree with all of them. Or, at the very least, we have a slightly alternate opinion. So this is going to be the first one where we challenge the audience and see where we end up.
So questions?
Questions, I guess.
All right.
But, again, overall, the purpose of this is not necessarily to talk about the book and the movie. It's seeing if you could read the book and watch the movie and have a conversation about it. I did kind of touched on it. I watched the 1975 version because that was the highest audience rated on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, and it's just better rated. Looking at the time period and the casting of the 2004 one, I could probably understand why. Anyways, let's get to the questions.
So, what is the philosophy or message behind the book and or movie? Such as themes, metaphors, and symbolisms.
So we'll touch on it maybe after we get through. Obviously, this is a commentary on how women are or at the very least were, especially kind of at the time that this woman was living through in her life. Women were expected to be housewives and be supportive of their husbands and cater to them and their children. Cater to their husbands and their children. Or at least that's, the modern lens perspective on it. You said this was written in 72?
72.
I don't know how old she is or was at the time of writing it, so it's a little difficult to say.
43 when the book came out.
So yeah, she definitely lived through it and saw that. And the struggle of women trying to get into school and educate themselves more a little bit. So I can understand her wanting to comment on that. And that's perfectly understandable, right? Because women are people and they deserve to seek an education if they want to.
If they want to. It's also the fear of men in their world changing and wanting to keep it the way it is.
Fear that, which we just watched The Craft Legacy.
Oh my God.
And I watched the new Black Christmas, and that's a theme in both of those also. Of men particularly white men wanting to maintain their position and power. And I'm really a little surprised that this wasn't a little bit more overt about it, but at the same time, it was kind of refreshing that it wasn't just outright saying it. Because Diz, I think, I don't know, I kind of lost track of who was who for the men. Because it's really insignificant, but at the end, he says, wouldn't it be nice if your husband came home and just gave you praise and everything? Even though your body's falling apart and you're sagging all over the place and stuff.
Jeez.
That's all he gives to it. So it's one of those, again, poor execution.
Yeah.
I almost would have rather it have been more overt about it, more upfront, and just said, yeah, we're men and we want to maintain our position.
I mean, other than the why do they call you Diz question, I think the only thing Diz says to her is he's watching her make coffee, and he says he likes to watch women do housework. Little
domestic chores.
Little domestic chores, yes.
So I think that's what he says in the movie, too.
The only thing he says to her.
I'm getting a feeling that this is probably going to be spot on. Except for the back of that comments on it being a satire of media also. Does that come across in the book any, or?
Savage commentary on a media-driven society. I mean, not really. They don't really talk about the media-driven society. It's not even really hinted at. I mean, the only media that is actually mentioned is a bunch of feminist books that she reads.
Because, and the obvious reference of Walt Disney.
Yes.
Who, is probably a product of his time, so I don't feel we need to comment on that.
Because they don't mention any of the stuff that we do now, like magazine covers and this unrealistic expectation, or bloggers and the expectations they bring. Obviously, this wouldn't have bloggers, but newspapers, magazines. None of that's ever really mentioned. And the expectation that they build.
Yeah, savage, but how is it savage if it's hardly even mentioned? Because, she's a photographer. You could play on it through that, but her photography is barely even a thing in the movie. I don't know if it is in the book.
It's just this thing that's just
used to try to coerce her into her situation.
I'm not even sure that's a thing. It's just photography is what she does randomly, occasionally. It's it's kind of written like a bullet list of her day. And,
interesting.
And that's kind of how it reads, and that's kind of why it was hard for me, because I hate it. It's not my style.
Yeah, again, this interesting concept for this, and could be really well, I don't know about terrifying, but it could be a good suspenseful thriller, I don't know, I'm sure there's a place to talk about it later, but when they glitch.
That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen in the book at all? They don't short circuit or anything?
Nope.
Oh.
That's where I don't know where the suspense comes in, because nothing really happens until the last 20 pages.
Oh, that's interesting. You should see if that's an accurate number. Because it's the last 20 minutes where the movie gets interesting.
It's not because, Bobby starts to suspect, but Joanna's all yeah, maybe, I don't know. It's... There's not a lot of, other than the women, to clean, and up until Charmaine suddenly changes her personality, there's not really any hint for it. And Charmaine changes after a weekend away with her husband, and then she forgets that fact, and Bobby goes away with her husband, and there's a line. There's something about that I should mean something, but oh well, and just lets it go. There's no real suspense building anywhere, and...
Wow, this might be an instance where the movie's better than the book.
It might be, because when I say it reads like a to-do list, it does. I did the dishes, and I had a drink, and I sat down, and I had another drink, and then there'll be a random page where it talks about conversations she had. So it's like she's making notes on a to-do list.
Huh. Weird.
And then, Kim has a cough, but she only coughed once. Fingers crossed. It's really weirdly and badly written, in my opinion.
Anyways. Next question.
Sorry.
No, it seems like we're still able to have some conversation here.
Yes.
Anyway, but.
Next question.
Let's keep digging.
Were the portrayal of the characters realistic?
For what there's in the movie, for what they're supposed to be, for the most part. I mean, again, 1970s, so it's hard for me to relate to that. Specifically because people were a lot different then. There are a few times, and I made notes on it, so maybe we might want to do a breakdown. I don't know, we'll see. Or we can talk about certain points that we don't get to at the end. Maybe that's better.
Maybe.
But there's a few things that stand out to me and they're things that didn't exist then.
Yeah.
At least I don't think they did. But you have this super strong feminist movie, but then there's like a moment where she's begging she takes her photographs there for him to look at. Gallery man?
Sure.
I'm not an art person, so the guy who runs the gallery, Atkinson, she takes some photos to him at first, and you don't get any of that conversation, which would have been a great opportunity for the media thing, showing like this'll never make it in a magazine, and like play on that.
Right, that would. Like, she takes pictures of buildings.
Yeah, like, this isn't what we're looking for. This is what art's moving towards.
I guess they do mention the media a little bit. I forgot about this real quick. One of the male characters, Ike, is an illustrator, and he draws women in a certain way.
Yeah, see, and that they show it. They show him drawing her, which is an interesting part. Because, like, when it's at the meeting where she's allowed to sit, and he's drawing her, and you see him drawing her and making this coherent picture. And then he starts flipping through it, and you get her glance at a couple of them, like, that's some weird stuff that we didn't see you doing.
Because, like, she says to him at first, sarcastically, and I guess this would be the only dig at the media, thanks for making these expectations or whatever with your drawings when I was younger type thing. That's not an exact quote. I can't find it. But along those lines. And then after she sees the finished product, she's like, oh, I guess I can forgive you because she made her look so good.
Yeah, that's not how that happens in the movie. In the movie, she's just, yeah, she can sit in with us. I'm sure she's got a lot of great ideas. And then it's just the men talking and her in the background. And sometimes a little bit of a disoriented camera angle to show, like, maybe how upset she might be or something. And then she tries to say some things a couple of times and nobody listens to her. And then the meeting's over and she goes upstairs to check on the kids, comes back down. I think this is how it happens. Not that relevant. But she comes back down and he's showing off the pictures, and she sees the one that we see him drawing. And she's, oh, you're that Ike? And I didn't catch his last name.
Mazard.
And, like, she's, oh my God, I just wanted to be so much like you. I want people to know my name, blah, blah, blah.
Everyone's a Mazard girl.
Yeah. But she's, like, into it. It's not a dig or being snarky at him about it. Like, she's actually, like, fangirling a little bit over him.
See, Bobby is sarcastic about it, and they are sarcastic about it. So I guess there is that aspect. I forgot about the illustration.
But back to what I was saying, when she goes to Atkins the second time, when we actually see the conversation, she's just rambling on and practically begging him to accept her work. But at the same time, she's also being very demanding. Like, you have to like these pictures.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, it seemed for what the movie is supposed to be in this. And again, the other aspect too is it's second wave feminism. So their priorities were a little bit different, and their perspective of the world was a little bit different. Like we said earlier, they were just seeking better education for themselves and not being forced to be stuck at home. So.
Yeah. So the question, are the characters realistic?
Well, and that was part of what I was saying. Like, for what it is, for the most part, again, it's hard because I'm not a 1970s person. I know just enough to know that I don't know anything. And again, different level of feminism than what we're used to seeing today.
So I think the characters were and weren't realistic from my perspective. Bobby and Joanna, because I'm not going to count the robots.
Yeah, because they are exactly what they're
robots.
supposed to be.
They're exactly what they're supposed to be. But Bobby and Joanna, from my interaction with feminists, are exactly what I would think feminists from the time would act like. I think it's realistic.
Oh, and
Walter, on the other hand, I don't get.
Yeah, because in the movie there's no... It's just... It starts with them moving there.
Because that's just it. They move there and, like, they show their relationship via her to-do list. And she does take care of the house. It's not a mess like Bobby's house. She does take care of the kids. They take turns with some of the chores. And there's no real, like, problem in their relationship up until closer to the end. They have sex, and afterwards she says, "Was it good for you?" and feels self-conscious that it wasn't, that he's not enjoying it anymore. It's just kind of shoved in there.
Is he showing anything, or is it a product of other relationships, quote unquote, that happen throughout? Or
it's kind of just out of nowhere.
Because in the movie, when they first move there,
he goes to the club and then comes home and she's asleep, so he masturbates in bed with her next to him.
No, that's completely different too. Oh. He just sits down in the chair and drinks. Like, I've got some ideas about some of this, but let me, because after they get there, there's no sense of time framing at all. Like, days, weeks, months, whatever. Like, it feels like a series of days, but it's really like 4 months. But, like, everything's always green. And it's in Connecticut. Like, it's weird. Anyways, she's still questioning why they moved. And he says, we both agreed on this. It was better for the kids because of the school. It's safer. It's better for you because it gives you more opportunity to work on your photography. There's plenty enough rooms. You could use one of them as a dark room. It's a great deal on the house. But this is one of the things that stood out to me is, like, because we kind of talked about it a little bit. You quoted a couple things at me. And it's this commentary on women staying at home, but that's what she does. Other than the photography, which isn't really even a thing for her. It's like a hobby.
Exactly.
Even though she has these big, ambitious dreams to...
But it's something that she fits in at night or while the kids are at school. And in the book, she's happy. She says that she's happy. Antisocial women aside, they still drive into the city all the time to hang out with those friends. So she's happy, and he's happy. He makes a random comment, again, closer to the end, that she should wear lipstick more often.
Yeah.
But their relationship seems fine and happy. And I'd say, people on the outside looking in, but the book is from her perspective.
Because, like, this is all before she's even named. Which I felt there was a purpose to that, but looking back, I don't think there is. Because, But they have an argument where she's... it's when he's talking about the men's club and possibly joining. And she's asking him questions. And she keeps having to ask more questions to try to get an actual answer out of him. and he keeps not necessarily dodging, but not answering at the same time.
Yeah.
And she's just, you can tell that in that moment it's supposed to be a commentary on her not feeling equal in the relationship, because she comments that he just does things and then asks her if she wants to after he's kind of already made the decision. So, like, the house, he was already looking at houses and then asked her if she wanted to move, and then put a down payment on the house and asked her if she liked the house and stuff like that.
I didn't get that impression at all. I mean, there is, once she starts to catch on that something's going on and she wants to move, she asks him, why did we have to come to Stepford anyway? Why not this town or this town? This area, I guess. Or this area.
He suggests other towns later on when she says she wants to move. But he's also follows it up with, but do you actually think you'd be happy there, or are you going to make me move again? So, like, the movie, and a lot of times I hate when people comment on this because they're doing it poorly. But a lot of him seems like he is gaslighting her in the movie. And it's into my theory about things is that they reached out to him, or he found information on this place that, you know, people normally wouldn't see, that's not intended for normal people or something, that it's a safe haven for men to be men and their wives will be perfect. And after his first meeting with the men's club, he seems upset and distraught over something, like they told him exactly what was going to happen. Yeah. And he was struggling with that internally, but we don't know because we don't get that. We don't get any background from him at all. He's just there. Like most of the characters are just there.
In the book, he doesn't start gaslighting her until the end when she really starts pushing to move. He goes, okay, but you might be overreacting. See a therapist first. And all this stuff. So, like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
She's smart about it. And she's like, fine, but I'm going to find one on my own.
She does. And then
which is good. Like, that's good writing.
And the other men, when they track her down after she runs away, they're, I guess, gaslighting her too. They're all like, that doesn't make sense. You think if we had the ability to make women robots, we'd be here in this town. We wouldn't, profit from it in some way. That doesn't make any sense. And they eventually talk her into believing that...
No.
Okay, they're not robots. I am crazy.
Yeah, you don't really get that in the movie because it like, once it goes to where it's going, it just goes and then it ends.
Because one of them says, well, if you see one of them bleed, will you believe then that they're not robots? And she says, yes. And so they pick Bobby, her friend, and then she's got the butcher's knife, and she changed her mind. She's like, I don't need to see, I believe. But that's when cut to black, and then next chapter, the other new person who hadn't been roboted yet sees her in the supermarket, and she's a robot now.
See, and this is another instance of where the movie might actually be a little bit better, because she kind of starts piecing it together herself. Like, she, after seeing the psychiatrist, she goes home, and her psychiatrist is like, look, I have to go out of town. I'm going to write you a prescription. Get your kids. Get out of there. If nothing else, that'll help you calm down a little bit until we can talk. Because, like, for a minute there while she's talking to the psychiatrist, I'm like, even though she found her own, is this lady still part of the club?
I did question that, too. My psychiatrist didn't tell her to take the kid. She gave her a prescription and then just told her, we'll talk about this when I get back from my vacation. Because she does start piecing it together. She looks at old newspapers from back when Stepford was normal. And that's when she pieces it together. And that's when she decides to take the pill from the doctor to calm herself down and then go take the kids and go, but...
And she goes home, and Walter sent the kids off to friends.
Yep.
And he's trying to get her to go upstairs and lay down, and...
Yep.
And she rightfully gets upset because he's like, you need to go. He starts being more assertive and aggressive. And, I just wrote it down. He's being aggressive. And she's like, no, I won't. You can't tell me what to do, you bastard. And he slams his cup down. And then she runs upstairs and he chases her. And she locks herself in the bedroom. And he's like trying to push his way in. And then he backs up on the banister like he's like rearing up to break the door down. And he cut to her inside, and I'm like, oh, cool, this is going to start getting good. And like he's going to start slamming on the door and being really violent and scary. Like, that's what I mean by good, is like we're finally going to get some actually scary stuff.
Yeah.
But then it cuts back to him outside, and he kind of was like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. She's exactly where I want her. Like, it's...
Bit more action-y than the book. He goes downstairs to make a phone call, and she sneaks out, and the other men chase her down in the snow.
Then he goes downstairs and makes a phone call, and she sneaks out of the house, and it's raining.
Snowing.
Because it's like June
it's
or
Christmas.
Maybe July. Yeah. Like, it's very confused. Like, they're in school, but then they're still in school in the middle of summer, and I don't know what's going on.
Now, the book is very exact. They moved in September. It takes 4 months for the Stepfording to happen.
Which is weird.
It's because they have to get all this data.
I suppose.
The illustrations, and one of the other guys, he's doing...
collects voices and...
a thing. Can you read this stuff for me? Yeah. Yeah. Next question.
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
But then she goes to Bobby's house, and she's like, Bobby, you've changed, blah, blah, blah. And then she... because Bobby's essentially an NPC now. And she's like, archaic. Do you know what archaic means? And Bobby's like, no, I don't know what that means. Why are you asking me? And she's like, because you knew a couple months ago when the other women didn't know. That's proof that you're just like them. And then she's like, I bleed, do you bleed? And she cuts herself. And then she stabs Bobby.
Oh, jeez.
And Bobby's just like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? You need coffee. And she goes and grabs a cup, and she's, why would you do that? And she comes over and just drops the coffee cup, and then turns back and goes and gets another coffee cup. Why would you do that? Drops it, and she glitches.
Nope, there's never any of that.
And it's like, that's stuff that could be really good, because Carol does it too. She gets in an accident, and she's repeating the same phrase over and over again. And this is where, like, I had an idea of what the movie was, what the overall story was, and it kind of spoiled it, or I was spoiled a little bit on it. So, honestly, it probably helped me, because if it didn't, I'd just be like, what the fuck is this weird shit happening? Then she goes and confronts Diz, or she goes back home, whacks Walter over the head with a fireplace poker.
Jeez.
And she's like, where's my kids? And he's at the place where we meet. I forget. The association. So she goes to the association, and Diz has a minor monologue because she's like, why? And that's when he says the thing I said earlier. And then she runs away from him and sees her replacement and fade to black. Like, it's wrapping up a scarf like it's going to choke her or whatever. Fade to black. And then supermarket.
None of that. None of that at all. There's none of the action-y stuff. There's really not even a confirmation that they're actually robots. It could be hypnotism.
Could be.
Because there's no glitching, no seeing your replacement.
And that's...
I mean, the evidence of what the men do suggests robots, and obviously they're robots. But
spoiler for another movie, Get Out. For watching this, I did sense a little bit of this in Get Out. I could see a little bit of influence there. Because there is hypnotism and it's white people taking over black people's bodies. Anyways.
So how did it make you feel?
Nothing. Because it just took so long to get to the point. And again, it does things throughout. I said, Carol gets in the accident. She's glitching then where she starts repeating herself. Do I have note of what she says? It's just my head. It's just my head. It's just my head. And like Joanna points out, the hospital's that way. They went the other way. And her husband's like, no. And then he turns and he looks and he's like, oh, I guess you're right. You are 100% right. And then later at this big party, and the only reason why this scene is there is to show Carol glitching again, really. She's standing with the women and she goes, I'm just going to die if I don't get that recipe. And then she just starts walking around the party up to random tables and stuff and repeating that same phrase. I'm just going to die if I don't get that recipe. And then her husband has to grab her and he's like, I told you to lay off the booze. And which I'm like, again, another moment where you could use that to build some suspense. And like background things. This would be a great background things movie.
I also feel nothing for this. I thought there was no real tension building. It was lazy and it was boring. I don't think it was much of a thriller at all. There's just no substance to it. I don't even think it's really satire.
Definitely in the movie, it's not a satire. It's a straight-on commentary.
It's just blah. I mean, if sticking with since it's not a thriller, if we're trying to find something scary about it, like our horror themeness that we do, the scary thing, I guess, would be a lack of individuality and conformity.
That, loss of self, like, it's there to be scary. Like, that element of fear that it should invoke is there. It's just not actually explored.
No, I think you gotta really...
Because, like, it doesn't actually come in until the end when, like, yes, there's definitely something wrong with these women, and... She
panics over it. But again, not till the end. There's just...
But because the book doesn't actually confirm anything, it definitely doesn't. Whereas the movie confirms exactly what they are, and I think that helps a little bit. Sorry.
I know the whole point is the Stepford Wives, but the book also frustrated me because I don't like this negativity toward housewives.
Yes,
It's one thing, they're robots, and that's weird, but the place of the negative attitude she comes from, I hate it, because I hate that negativity. Because she says, how could she possibly be happy being a housewife? Some people are.
Well, so, is that internal thoughts, or is that an actual conversation with Bobby?
I think it might be internal thoughts.
Because that is definitely something that I think maybe happens more in the book, and it's hard to convey it without having an awkward conversation with somebody in the movie.
Yeah, because her and Bobby just talk about all these women's association things they want, or a women's association they want to try and do in these clubs they want to start and all this stuff.
Is there a moment where they're talking to the women? Because there's a little montage of them trying to talk to the women and build their own women's club.
Yes, that's what I was literally just saying.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my notes. Because in the movie, Carol was the president. Check. But now she's happy supporting her family. Which I think is how could she be happy, right?
It's because she tries to talk Carol into having a cup of coffee, and Carol's all like, I can't, I gotta go wax my floors.
But in the movie, when they're sitting down with her trying to convince her, Joanna asks her, is it enough? Is what you do enough for you? Or not for you, but like that's the implied. And Carol rightfully says, what's enough for me may not be enough for you. And that's perfectly acceptable. And that's one of my problems with a lot of the conversations that people are trying to have is that nobody is respecting individual choice anymore.
Yeah.
We've lumped all of these people into groups, and because you're a part of this group in my head, because I've compartmentalized you here, you should want the same things that I do.
Yeah, in her head, she calls the housewives patsies.
Oh, they say all kinds of really mean stuff about the housewives. I don't even remember most of them. I wrote down pan scrubbers.
And she doesn't blame Ted for taking advantage of her being an asked-to-be-exploited patsy. Anywhoosie. Would you rewatch it?
Potentially. Oh, see, like... Sorry, I was looking into Ira Levine, and Ira is actually a man. I didn't realize that. I thought this was a woman. Because Ira could go either way. So, that might be part of the problem. But, like, this is 1, 2, 3, 4... His fourth book? After Rosemary's Baby. Which is supposed to be really good.
Oh, I don't hold out much hope for it. Not because of content, just writing style. I don't like this writing style. I would not reread it. I am going to watch both the other movies.
I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to watch the new one, because I think that they're going to have changed too much.
That's what, Nicole Kidman?
Yeah.
You can watch it. She's got a pretty face. Won't hurt you.
I don't really like her too much.
Really?
I did for a little while from Batman Forever, but that's because she's always taking her clothes off in that.
She's so pretty.
She's also not blonde in it.
Is she not?
No.
Oh.
I mean, there's...
I like her as a redhead anyway.
I'm not a big Nicole Kidman fan. Like, I like her more than Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock. I will watch movies with her in it. It just...
I think she's
she's
pretty.
Not a pull for me.
Well, then Glenn Close is in it. Watch it for her.
It's got Bette Midler, too.
Oh, that's right. She's Bobby.
She's Bobby, and that's one of my concerns. Anyways, watch it again. Maybe. I mean, it's not a bad movie. Like, I would watch it with you so that way I can pay a little bit more attention, maybe. I'll try. It's boring.
But I wouldn't reread it. I mean, you can read it if you want.
Oh, no, thanks.
Is the setting a characteristic of the story? Not necessarily, I don't think.
Inclined to lean yes a little bit.
Oh, really?
I mean, it could take place pretty much anywhere. It's just, it happened to be here. But we've talked about this before.
The conditions do have to be right for it to have taken place here. It would have to be in a small enough town, far enough away from the other towns for it not to be noticed.
So, like, here would be great.
Anyway. So I guess you won me to your side. Yeah, the setting is a characteristic of the story.
Because it's like when we were first talking about this question in general with the Hellbound Heart, when we were doing it, like, it could take place pretty much anywhere, but because it is set there, it is.
It's because...
And
off topic, I'm not going to go into it.
No, we won. I won.
You won this one. How did you find the pacing?
It was pretty consistent. But again, it was slow. And I don't have a problem with a slow-burning movie. But it's gotta do something interesting with it. Like, there has to be some of the story. Because, like, the first 15 minutes... I was worried that this was going to be Suspiria from 1977. Or, like, I watched Darling, which is 2017 movie last night. And those two movies, plays so heavily on the music.
Yeah.
And the visuals to tell the story, and it could not captivate me, because if you miss one or two little things for whatever reason, you don't know what's going on. But once they got there and she started interacting with people a little bit more, like Bobby, even with her husband, even with Walt, when they actually started interacting, it picked up a little bit. And like, most of my not paying attention was also taking notes, so it was also hard being my first viewing and taking notes, because usually I'll watch it once to try to be immersed in it, and then I'll watch it a second or third time for taking notes. But somebody didn't give me the chance.
Well, you knew I was reading it this week. You knew it was only a pamphlet.
I didn't until yesterday, and
how
whatever.
Did I find the
figured
pacing?
You'd take more notes.
I would have taken more notes if it wasn't a to-do list. I found this, it's not pacing, I guess. Dull. This is dull. It's dull a pace.
It's probably sluggish, which is a pacing.
It is. I hated this book so much.
And like, the pacing comes from the bad writing style.
So it was slow. It was just dull and slow till the last 20 pages, when it was everything all at once, and then... And
even then, it still wasn't anything.
Yeah.
From the sounds of it, mine was a lot more exciting than yours.
It was. This was just so nothing. It's like a saltine cracker.
Without the salt.
Yeah, it's just nothing. It's just a cracker.
You're a cracker. Next question.
Favorite part. I've got this one. My favorite part was when it was over and I could be done with it.
Okay. Probably the scene with Bobby where she's piecing everything together. Like, I mean, and the I bleed, do you bleed thing just kind of comes out of nowhere, because nothing else is set up for these people to be robots or something. Like, she knows they're off, she knows there's something wrong, and maybe in a panic desperation you would go to that.
Well, Bobby thinks it's chemicals in the water or the air, because...
Bobby does think that in the movie also.
There was this article out of somewhere in Texas that everyone was really tranquil because there was something in the water.
Yeah. So then they drive by the electronics factory things.
So they write to the department, the State Department of Health, and they write back and say everything's tested, it's clean. Thanks for sharing your concern,
nice.
But it's all fine. So
another instance of the movie being a little bit better than the book is how does it play out? Because Joanna recommends going to the State Department and writing them a letter and having them check it out. And Bobby is like, I've worked for those places. There's, like, it's just going to get lost. Like, not even they're going to reply back. It's going to get lost.
That's it. Bobby said that too, but they still did the letter thing and got a letter back.
And then Bobby's like, we need a trusted chemist. And I don't know any. And then, well, I tease this a little bit. Another moment of this movie failing the Bechdel test. But Joanna goes into this little backstory about how she knows this chemist. And Bobby's like, oh, you should get in touch with him. And she's like, that would be weird. I haven't talked to him since we broke up, because he's the guy who took her virginity.
Yeah.
You're looking at me like that, but you said that didn't happen in the book, so I don't know why you're looking at me weird.
No, I'm looking at you weird because I can't see how it failed the Bechdel test. All they have to do is be two women talking about something other than men, and they talk about feminism.
They started talking about something else, and then it started talking about a boy.
And that happens in every single conversation?
Not every, but if it has even one where they're talking about men, the movie fails the Bechdel test. But there's a few of them.
That's just ridiculous.
The Bechdel test actually honestly doesn't mean anything at all anyways, as far as whether or not a movie is feminist. Because, women are people, women have relationships, and most of the time they're with men, and people talk about their relationships. Anyways, that's a nice little tangent. Then they take some of the water to this guy, and they do a little bit of catching up, and he's like, "Are you happy?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally happy." And he's like, "Yeah, we're working on 9 years. By the way, I'm very happy too." And he's like, "Here, look at these readings of the water." And he wrote on there, "I'm not happy either." It was just a weird moment.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had to talk about that, but the electronics factory, I think, was maybe a minor commentary on rising technology, because every time there's a new kind of technology, we fear it. So we did that I'm sure we did it with the wheel, but there's no way to prove that. But from like carts and buggies to cars, there was some apprehension, and like planes and rising computers and internet, and now our big fear is AI. So that's what I took with, because they drive by all these tech factories. It's just like, they're dumping stuff in the water. That's what's doing it.
See, because Bobby does think that in the book too, but they don't test the water. She says it's a waste of time to write, but they do it anyway. They said we'll never hear back, but they hear back anyway.
Which, I mean, I don't know. I think the movie does a better job diving into it.
This book is mostly filler.
So is the movie, but apparently the movie does it better. What was the question?
Your favorite part?
Oh.
Mine was nothing. There's not a thing I liked about this book.
No, it's when she's piecing it together, because it's her taking agency, doing it on her own, and it being an actual feminist statement for what this is supposed to be. But I also like kick-ass women, so you could almost say that I fetishize it.
Ouch.
What?
I don't kick ass. You're hurting my feelings.
There's different ways to kick ass. What's kick-ass for you is not kick-ass for somebody else. Nailed it.
You're lucky I don't have feelings.
Is that really why you didn't feel anything for this book?
I was rooting for the robots the entire time. I just wanted it to be done.
Yeah.
And I don't see what's wrong with being a housewife.
Again, that's that individual agency, that individual choice to do what you think is best for you.
And that's fine. That's fine. She can be feminist. They can be housewives. I don't like the attitude that Joanna
that it has
came
to be
into.
Demonized.
Yes, and it rubbed me the wrong way, and that happened like right away at the beginning of the book, which set the tone for my entire reading of it.
What I was getting to is that these messages oftentimes, they demonize a group of people for wanting to live a life that they choose, because again, they're compartmentalized everybody into these boxes, and if you don't quite fit in that box right, you're part of the problem. And we're not having healthy conversations about any of this shit. Any more questions?
No, I have nothing more to say about this. There are no more questions.
I don't know. I had that note about her not being named, and because she doesn't get her name until 23 minutes into the movie. We don't get the main character's name until almost a half hour into the movie. Walter gets his name at 13 minutes. And I thought for a moment it could be a commentary on how women aren't seen as people or something like that, because nobody says her name until Bobby says her name, because she's just chilling in this field, and yeah. Bobby comes running up, Joanna, are you Joanna? It's a very awkward thing. So it's another woman naming her, but that loses itself a little bit when Walter also wasn't named for a significant amount of time in the movie. When the movie had started and he had gotten in the car and she said, "All right, Walter, let's go," and you knew what his name was right away, and we move on to this new place and she's still not named, then I could see it being a thing.
Yeah.
It's just in general, I found it weird in the movie. Like, how can you go that long without naming your characters? That's so, like, in my notes for most of it, up until that point, I just called them the man and the woman. That was why I labeled them such in my things. I also had a funny note in here, too. God, I wish we could go through my notes sometimes, because I make I make some pretty good jokes sometimes. Like, her daughter showing... I think it's her daughter. I don't know. I don't know what they have for children. Because at one point it's just two boys. There's another point where it's a boy and a girl. I don't know.
She's a boy and a girl.
Okay. But anyway, she's sitting with her.
Has one boy.
Oh, geez. She's got
three boys.
Ton of kids in the movie.
She's got 3 boys. The one is the one that's always over at Joanna's house.
Maybe. But she's comforting, like, her daughter is doing the whole, my bear isn't comfortable here, he wants to go home, blah, blah, blah. Which is another thing that's like a trope in these movies when people move new places, usually haunted movies, and the kids are like, I don't want to be here, neither does my teddy bear, we should leave.
Yeah. And
the moment of trying to comfort the child, but doing it through the bear, and he's a Stepford bear, and I said, roll credits. I don't think I really had anything else. Just a couple moments where, because I knew what was going on, we have the moment where Charlene disappears, and I knew what that was, and then Bobby's talking about going with her husband Dave to the plaza by themselves, and I was like, look out!
Fascinating.
Right? Oh, and there's a comment about Bobby wanting another woman's boobs, because apparently this woman has a better rack than she does. And, I asked about the sex thing because there's a moment where they just walk into these people's house.
Weirdos.
Right? It's during, they're trying to recruit other women to their women's club, and this couple is having sex, and the woman was calling him the best, and no one better than him. She's calling him a king and a master and stuff. So I was wondering if, like, that played into her own psyche a little bit.
Another problem I had with this is, for it to be a thriller for me, it has to at least be semi-realistic, and I don't think the premise is realistic at all, that these men made such lifelike robots, and the fact that men would want these perfect robot wives anyway.
No. Oh, I did also make a comment about it being kind of like Pleasantville. Because it had some very Pleasantville vibes, especially if you consider it like flipped or reversed.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of parallel there too, and how the men just want their lives the way it was, and the women all want to change and do different stuff now, and don't want to just be the in-house.
Because honestly, living with a Stepford wife would be boring. Nobody really wants that.
No. And that's part of my confusion with Waltz is like, why did you move them here? Like, was he recruited somehow? That would have been an interesting little aspect to include.
You will never know.
It's headcanon. I do know. He was. Alright. I forgot to do it at the beginning. Anyways. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube if you're listening there. If you're on a podcatcher, rate and review. It helps get the word out. If you do write a review or if you do leave a comment, be honest. That way we can grow and be better. We're still trying to figure this out. We forgot to rate this.
Do you think it was a success?
I think so. I think we were able to keep pretty much in step with each other.
I think so. This is a pass.
This is a pass. Oh, and I know we talked about it a few times. We we were going to try to do a bonus episode for Amityville Horror. It just didn't work out that well. Partially because I watched both versions, so if we're going to try that, I think we have to
probably
be separate. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. If you do leave a comment watching this on YouTube, let us know what you're liking, what you're not liking. These things are kind of messy when we talk about them, but that's almost kind of intentional because we spoil the shit out of it. But if you don't actually know where things happen, it still works, kind of. Or rate and review if you're listening on a podcatcher. Same rules apply. Be honest, because I don't get better with people just stroking my ego. Toodles.